Hello and welcome to GreenBytes Wednesdays. GreenBytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and steer consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the GreenBytes Wednesday podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote and I am glad to be your host. Welcome on board. Hello there and welcome. This is GreenBytes Wednesdays. GreenBytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations, and we hope that these conversations can steer within you who's listening some consciousness when it comes to digital ecosystem. On the podcast, we talk about the impact of our digital footprint, especially as Nigerians. We have an overview or an outlook of Nigeria's technology ecosystem. And we also sort of delve into some advanced knowledge, trends, tools that can enable us to achieve digital sustainability. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative. Scale is Smart Climate Awareness Learning Empowerment Initiative funded by the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Welcome on board. So are you someone who's just curious about climate change? Are you a tech entrepreneur? Are you a climate, enthusiast? Whatever it is, welcome. This is where you find knowledge. This is where you find insights as we bring together resource persons from different walks of life. And together we talk about digital emissions. We talk about sustainability. We talk about the role of you as an individual in helping achieve digital sustainability. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. It's a pleasure to be your host and to guide you through these conversations. I should say that this edition is a very special one. As you may have noticed if you've checked out other episodes, I'm always sitting next to a guest. But this time, I'm sitting all alone. So it's just you and I having conversations. Think of it that way. And the idea is just to run you through all the episodes we've done so far. We've tried the best that we can, thanks to the team, wonderful Adebote and Ayo, putting together resource persons from different walks of life, like I said. And we've been able to cover cutting-edge tech solutions. We've talked about emerging trends. We've shared some very tangible steps that you as an individual can take, that you can introduce to a tech startup, to your businesses, to your place of work, to your place of worship, as we work towards building a greener future. We've talked a lot also from renewable energy to breakthrough when it comes to carbon emissions, to carbon accounting, to capturing. Think of it as wide as you want. We've definitely had an episode where we spoke about something very useful, something very insightful. So on this episode, I just run you through the over 24 episodes that we've had on GreenBytes Wednesday. Welcome once again. So we started off the series with a chat around a citizen-driven path to net zero emission. My guest was Omono Okonkwo, an energy communicator and expert. And the idea was just to talk about how can an average citizen out there become more excited or sort of find his or her role when it comes to net zero emissions. We talked about what exactly is net zero emissions. And as you probably know, one thing that we've done on all the episodes is to see that we can simplify some of these big jargons. Sometimes you hear carbon emissions, carbon capture, you hear GHG and UNCCC. You hear all of these very complex, acronyms and statements, and you're wondering what exactly does it mean. If you followed through all the episodes we've had, then you definitely find answers to those and many more. So that was the first episode, A Citizen-Driven Path to Net Zero Emissions. And we talked about what are some practical things that you can do as a citizen? What are some local communities, ideas that local communities can think about? What's the role of businesses? And how does all of this connect with our digital usage? What are the simple things that you as an individual can do to achieve or to contribute towards achieving net zero? That was the focus of episode 1 of GreenBytes Wednesday. Thereafter, we talked about the circular economic playbook. I really enjoyed that conversation with Loretta Boniface, the director of EcoCycle. It was a very simple, arty, chatty talk around what exactly is circular economy. That's probably another, lingo that we throw around the place. Circular economy, circular economy. There we spoke about, or sort of demystify this concept of circular economy, what exactly it meant. And Loretta sort of guided us through a playbook, like a working document. What should be the most important components in a circular economic guide? So we're thinking, okay, if you run a business or even in your house, what are some insights? What are some things to keep in mind that can help you think around circularity, think about circular, sort of the end of life to a particular item? How can you give it another life? We talked about gamifying the concept of climate change. What are some new approach that we can bring to the table to see that more people are more encouraged, more people are more interested when it comes to climate conversations? Away from that, if you missed it, check out episode 3, where I had a chat with a co-podcaster, Olubumi Olajide. We spoke about reclaiming sustainability consumption. We spoke about consumption in a digital age. How can we reclaim sustainability? And that was a very insightful conversation as we talked about what were some of the, in what ways do we consume in this digital age, from booking for a ride on your apps or on apps on your phone, to ordering for food, all of those things you do with your digital, in the digital space. What exactly does this consumption mean to you as an individual, to your pockets, your finances, but also to the environment? What impact is it giving, or is it resulting in, when we look at the impact on our environment? And how can we see that the sustainability component is not missing? How can we reclaim the sustainability component in all of this digital advancement? That was a very, very interesting conversation. I remember I particularly talked about device as a service, and it talked about some programs, some transparency approach that can help us make better informed choices, especially as we engage on different digital platforms. So check that out. It was episode 3, and it was around consumption in digital age, reclaiming sustainability. One of the most exciting conversation I also had was with David Arinze on episode 5. If I'm being honest, that episode was not planned ahead. We just thought, hey, let's sort of delve into some innovative approach when it comes to energy access and efficiency. Very relevant for this podcast series, very relevant to the entire aim of the Scale Initiative. And so we had this very arty conversation. David shared with me, and you probably should check it out, some very insightful thoughts. He talked about how phones are being used to control lighting. He talked about how he thinks about what exactly he installs into his house, from the point of, is not when he gets the bill at the end of the month or at the end of the week that he gets to regret what he has installed. He talks about how we have to be thinking energy efficiency, energy usage, even from building houses, from the cars that we choose to drive, from how we choose to transport ourselves. And he sort of scaled it up beyond individual level to organizations. What choices should organizations make to make them better efficient? How does this tell on their finances? Maybe not in a short period of time, because he acknowledged, as many of you know, that this could be very financial intensive at the start. But when you look at the big picture, when you spread it over a period of years, then you can beat your chest and say, hey, we made the right decision by thinking sustainability in this particular thing we did. So he did share, across all different walks of life, from agriculture to food, to oil and gas, to transport. How exactly can we be more conscious about our energy usage, and what tools, what trends can we bring to fore for us to become more energy efficient? Episode 5 was a chat with Rita Idehai, and we spoke about how tech is shaping the green energy transition. If you've not heard about the energy transition or you're thinking, what exactly is the energy transition? That's an episode that you should listen to. We talked about what exactly it means when we have these global conversations around the need to shift from fossil fuel or fossil-based energy consumption to cleaner alternatives. And then she narrowed it down to telling us about how technology can play a very central role in that. Though she's an waste expert, or because she is an expert in the waste sector, we talked a little bit also about her project, which is the reverse vending machine, a very novel approach where she uses tech to collect waste, maybe not digital waste at this level, but at least to collect plastic waste, metal waste, and to incentivize people. That was also a very exciting conversation with Rita Idei. That's episode 5, how tech is shaping the green energy transition. If you've been wondering, what does it mean to be a sustainable digital enterprise? You probably have heard it or seen it, oh, we are a sustainable digital enterprise. What exactly does it mean? If that's what you're curious to know, check out episode 6 of GreenBytes Wednesday. I had a chat with Victor Apan, a digital sustainability expert, and we talked about a roadmap for how digital enterprises in Nigeria can become greener, can become more resilient, even beyond the now, as we would like to say, into the future. So if you're thinking of building an enterprise and you want it to be sustainable, you want it to be digital focused, then what are the key things you need to think about? What do you need to put, at the back of your mind as you start that journey? We discussed all of that on episode 6 of GreenBytes Wednesday. It's titled, What Does It Mean to Be a Sustainable Digital Enterprise? By the way, I said earlier, and I should repeat, that the podcast is available on all podcast streaming platforms. You can find it on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcast, on SoundCloud. Just type GreenBytes Wednesday and you'll find it there. And I really do hope that all of these conversations is sort of opening up your mind to understanding that, hey, there is a role that I as an individual can play, that there is a role or there is something that my company, my organization can do different to make the world a better place. Or perhaps to just think about, hey, as an individual, how can I balance my life also with sort of my digital well-being, also with my commitments to a shared planet? And that's what we also spoke, or that's what we spoke about on episode 7 of GreenBytes Wednesday, digital detox. It was the first time that I was sort of delving into that conversation, really. What is digital detox? Perhaps it's the first time you're hearing about it also. How can we find balance in an always on world? I remember some statistics from that episode where we talked about how the average Gen Z spends over 9 hours, interacting with their phone. How we talked about children from 2 years old already interacting with screens and laptops and phones. And what does all this mean for our digital well-being as a people? Oluwatosin Olabode, a certified digital wellness educator, walked us through all of that. How can we find, in our thirst to become more professional, to exceed or excel in our professional doings, how can we make sure that we do not compromise our personal well-being as we engage with our digital life, I should say? One thing that I'm very excited about when I look at all of these episodes that we've had is how it brings people from different walks of life, from private sector to government representatives to tech startups to professors to different professionals. And it's really, really what enriches GreenBytes Wednesday. For example, on episode 8, we had a conversation with the National Program Coordinator, Energy and Environment Department of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, Oluyomi Banjo. It covers for Nigeria, but also the West African region. And we spoke around the path to digital zero waste compliance. As you probably would know, most of the conversation is around digital waste, right? But hey, what's happening with compliance? What regulations are there? Who is enforcing to see that these regulations are being used? That was the conversation we had. And it did share quite a lot of interesting things. One thing that stood out was how organizations or, member organizations can play a very active role in seeing that members of those who belong to that organization are compliant to existing rules that exist. And I thought that was a very unique way to get more, groups, entities to really take action. We cannot just wait for the government. The government has done their bit, put out the policies. Now we cannot always wait for them to say, hey, you must police us around before we obey. Organizations can have associations that make sure that that is done. So check it out. It's episode 8 of GreenBytes Wednesday, Path to Zero Digital Waste Compliance. On episode 9, we talked about some strategies for responsible digital waste disposal. You probably think, hey, I have this phone, I have this gadget, these chargers, they are not useful again. What do I do with it? And that was what we talked about. It was Dr. Silvanos, a senior lecturer in environmental law, that spoke with us, or that I had this chat with, and he talked about how can we become more responsible as individuals. He talked about how the ICT sector can think about infrastructures, not just to collect, but also to incentivize and encourage more people to dispose digital waste in a more appropriate way. One of the privilege that I had was also speaking with Miss Ibukun Faluye. She is the executive director of EPRON, and EPRON is the E-Waste Producers Responsibility Organization of Nigeria. So when you talk about e-waste, they are the topmost. No one beats them to it in terms of knowledge, in terms of awareness, in terms of actions, and in terms of ensuring compliance, especially with other e-waste organizations or organizations that have e-waste or that produces e-waste. The topic of that episode was beyond recycling, stricter regulation for e-waste disposal. I mean, you probably know it's very easy for us to say, hey, recycle, recycle, recycle. But we know that less than 20% of waste generally, even plastic waste that are easier to recycle, less than 20% of them end up being recycled. So how then can we think beyond recycling? Are there regulations? Are there policy framework? Are there other methods that we can approach the conversation of e-waste disposal? That was the conversation I had with Mrs. Ibukun Faluyi on episode 10 of GreenBytes Wednesday. I should say my conversation with Ms. Ibukun was so nice. We did it twice, more or less, because we also talked about policy solutions to tackling the ballooning e-waste crisis. That was episode 11 of GreenBytes Wednesday. And Ms. Ibukun sort of, broke the ice. He said, hey, we are in trouble when we look at the e-waste crisis that we're facing. I think it was on that episode or some other episode where we talked about how think of 500 containers of e-waste being shipped into Nigeria. Just think of that happening every day or every month. And imagine how much waste that is coming into the country. We talked about also what are the international framework. We talked about the Basel Convention, for example, and how it has been structured or designed to see that waste are not just shipped carelessly across the world, but that there are responsibilities, there are actions, and there are methods that, not just the producers, but also those that are receiving, keep in mind. That was episode 11, which was policy solutions to tackling the ballooning e-waste crisis. On episode 12 of GreenBytes Wednesday, we talked about decarbonizing the digital ecosystem. Perhaps you've also heard of decarbonizing as one of those climate jargons, and you're wondering what exactly does it mean? You would find answers on episode 12 of GreenBytes Wednesday. My guest was Jennifer Anya. She is the program associate for the Nigerian Off-Grid Market Accelerator program, and we spoke around if we really would reduce the carbon emissions that we see in the digital ecosystem, what do we need to do? What do we need to keep in mind? Who are the main actors? How should they act? And what ways do we measure the successes or the results from their actions? We also spoke a little bit about the role of AI in promoting efficiency in decarbonizing or reducing our carbon emissions in Nigeria's digital ecosystem. On episode 13, we talked about the business components. Who doesn't like money? So what exactly are the business opportunities for, an ICT sector when it comes to the net zero economy? By now you probably know what net zero economy or what net zero means. So in this conversation of, hey, we don't want to emit so much, or we want to see that as we emit, we also, repair, or we take some counter action to reduce that emission or to balance out that emission. And we spoke about what business opportunities should folks in the ICT sector, in the tech space, begin to think about. So if you're thinking, hey, what business ideas can I really launch that will be sustainable and that will make a lot of funds or that will be profitable, then you should check out that conversation with Faiz Mohammed. It's episode 13 on GreenBytes Wednesdays. So very often we have organizations or different entities talking about, hey, we want to adopt low carbon technology, and they're thinking, oh, it's quite expensive. On episode 14 of GreenBytes Wednesday, Noro Ezekiel, the head of growth and innovation at Sea Solar, she shared with us some financial strategies for low carbon technology adoption. I remember she talked about equity, she talked about loan, she talked about different forms of, financial mechanisms that make it possible for individuals or registered organizations to get funds, to get loans, and to execute different progress or different projects around low carbon emission. Check that out on episode 14 of GreenBytes Wednesday. This time and age, everyone is talking about AI. Artificial intelligence is all over the place, and we cannot separate it when we also talk about sustainability or the digital space. So what exactly is the role? If you've been thinking or sort of curious about what are the roles of AI in promoting sustainable practices, Yemi Solves, the co-founder of Artificial Intelligence and Blockchain Initiative for Africa, shared with us some insights around, first, what are the carbon emissions that are in the tech industry. We also talked about what are the advanced, algorithms, models that are predicting patterns, that are predicting emission rate, and how can we use all of this to sort of steer ourselves in the right direction as we think towards incurring or as we think towards establishing more sustainable practices. On episode 16 of GreenBytes Wednesday, we answered a question that's on the mind of everyone. What question was it? Who is responsible for driving sustainability in Nigeria's tech ecosystem? I mean, everyone says, yes, we should do this. And we're probably thinking, hey, it's maybe the government. No, it's not the government. It's the private sector. Oh, no, it's not the private sector. It's the international funders. If you're still dilly-dallying or trying to wonder, hey, where should I pitch my tents, then listen to episode 16 of GreenBytes Wednesday. On that episode, I spoke with Adeshola Efiwat Olatunde, an environmental advocate who also has some experience working with the government, and she shared with us exactly, to put it in a very simple term, she answered the questions around who should drive sustainability in Nigeria's tech ecosystem. We also spoke about the role of research, and I should say different speakers at different points made mention, to research, talking about how research can improve the work we do, how we need more Nigerians, in the research space, how we need to communicate what has been researched already. So we did talk a lot about research at different points during the episodes. But then David Raymond Edet spoke particularly around advances in research for carbon neutrality. So if you think of, hey, net zero, carbon neutrality, what are some research that has been taking place? I'm smiling now because thinking about that conversation, I recalled how one of my first questions to David was, is net zero the same thing as carbon neutrality? If you want to find the answers, check out that episode. It's episode 17 on GreenBytes Wednesday. Segun Ogunwale, the co-founder and CEO of Bridgia Africa, spoke very brilliantly around some best practices for IT sustainability. So what are some best practices that is happening over, all over the world? And how can we put it into context here in Nigeria? Segun Ogunwale spoke about that and many more on episode 18 of GreenBytes Wednesday. Check it out. I think it was on that episode where we talked about cloud computing, software usage, how to, be more efficient with resource allocations. What are some barriers that really makes it difficult for IT companies to remain sustainable? And if you want to avoid all of those barriers or identify and find ways of getting, beyond them, then check out episode 18, Best Practices for IT Sustainability. On episode 19, we tried very hard to crack a nut around cloud computing. It's something that has been over, the head of many people. And then we put it side by side with an even harder topic of carbon costs. Also, I would say that's a niche or it's an area that is just finding a foot or finding a life for itself. So it's not so much that is known about it. So if you at least want to get an introductory crash course into carbon cost, into cloud computing, check out the conversation that we had with Nasir Ibrahim. He is currently the fund manager at Palladium, a UK affiliated organization. And on that episode 19, we spoke a lot around, what exactly is our carbon footprint that comes from the digital space? What exactly does cloud computing mean? How can we put a cost or a price for the carbon that is being emitted? What can we do with that cost or with that price that we place? On episode 20, we spoke around digital sobriety towards low carbon emissions. And as you probably know, if you've seen on our webpage, on our different social media platforms, you understand that digital sobriety is one of the key things that we're looking into or that we aim to open up on GreenBytes Wednesdays. Thanks again to the UK government and the funds that is being gotten through the Digital Access Program. We're trying to open up the minds of people to understand digital sobriety and what's the role of digital sobriety as we sort of walk towards low carbon emissions as a nation. My guest was the Senior Special Advisor to the President on Climate Technology and Operations. I called him Honorable, so I think I can say the same thing. But Mr. Olamide Fagboji was my guest on that episode, and we did explore some strategies, some initiatives that Nigeria needs to implement to promote digital sobriety and sustainability as a whole. Very exciting conversation. On episode 21, we spoke about digital solutions for emission reduction in Nigeria. A very experienced journalist and an environmental activist, Mr. Abdul Karim Majid, was the guest on that episode. And we spoke around what are some digital solutions that exist. We looked across the 7 NDC sectors. What are the emissions currently? How much do we emit from each of these sectors, from agri to water to waste to oil and gas to transportation to building to industries? And how can we see that we work towards reducing these emissions sector by sector, particularly through the use of digital solutions? That was the conversation, or that was the focus on episode 21 of GreenBytes Wednesdays. On episode 22, I know that all the guests we had are really smart people, but someone on my crew said, "Hey, that guy is so smart." Mr. Charles Igbo was the guest as we sort of delved into understanding data, facts, and figures across Nigeria's digital carbon footprint. So when we say, hey, how much is Nigeria emitting when it comes to that is accrued to the digital sector, he puts it at 34%. And I was saying to him, hey, shouldn't that be a sector of its own when we look at the indices? Find out more about data, facts, and figures when it comes to the digital carbon footprint of this country, Nigeria, on episode 22 of GreenBytes Wednesday. On episode 23, we talked about the role of research in driving sustainability. Dr. Silvanus Barnabas was my guest, and we spoke about some digital innovations, how, this conversation has to be connected with economic growth. He also delved into some challenges that researchers face across, the line of their work, and how can we see that researchers get, more skills, more finances, more organized in accessing or sort of in dwelling on the topic of sustainability. He talked about how most times we think of researchers in other fields, medicine, engineering, but not many people are looking into, hey, how can we get researchers in the field of sustainability? How can we empower them? How can we make them very more, relevant? Or how can they advance the push for Nigeria to become more sustainable? Ifeoma Malu, you probably remember from episode 24, where we spoke around policy for a sustainable tech solution. It was one of the very exciting conversations that I had hosting all of this podcast series. We spoke around policies. How can we make policies that are more eco-friendly? How can we see that practices that is happening or practices that are taking place in the tech sector also keep in mind the environmental component? We also talked about how can we incentivize a lot more people. What's the role? I mean, policies are good, but policies are not enough if we cannot incentivize people to then do, what these policies have outlined. That's what we discussed on episode 20, on episode 24 of GreenBytes Wednesday. And my guest was Ifeoma Malu, the Chief Executive Officer at Clean Tech Hub. On episode 25, I had a chat with Wale Ahmad. We talked about practical approach to emission reduction. So if we think of emissions from now that you're watching this or you're listening to this, what emissions are you accruing, or what emissions are being emitted by just engaging with this platform? When you go out and you transport yourself, when you place a ride to move from one place to another, when you place a ride to buy something, what emissions are being accrued from all of these, daily, very things that we really do not think deeply about, but in one way or the other, they are emissions. As I record this in the studio, looking at the lights and the gadgets and the batteries, what emissions have been, are all of this responsible for? So that's the kind of thoughts that Wale Ahmad really opened us up on episode 25, which was titled Practical Approach to Emission Reduction. Check it out. And like I said, share with your contacts, share with people within your network. And this, episode 26, is where we did a rundown of all that we've discussed, where we sort of, say big thank you to all our guests, all our resource persons who took their time, traveled from different parts of the country. Some even traveled from outside of Nigeria to make it possible for us to have conversations with them. So this is where we say thank you to all our resource persons from different parts of Nigeria, those who are to travel or abort their travel plans just to be a part of this. We are very, very grateful. And as we think about the next step for GreenBytes Wednesday under Scale initiative, we want to say again thank you to the UK government, particularly to the Digital Access Program that makes it possible for us to bring all of these episodes. We've also been tinkering a bit with, hey, what happens next? We're going to also have a digital course, so keep your tabs on our social media platforms and our website so you can see when the course is out, you can engage with it, you can take some lessons and see, hey, how much did you really learn? And also test yourself to see how much of it you're putting into practice. We also do hope that maybe in the near future, we'll be able to try other creative formats in communicating this. The aim of these conversations pretty much is not just to bring people here and talk, speak, fine English with them. So we've been thinking, hey, how can we do this in Pidgin? How can we do this in local languages? How can we try comics? How can we try other formats to see that the core of these conversations get to as many people that need to sort of take it in? We've also been thinking, hey, we've spoken a lot about the role of policymakers. How can we really get these policymakers to say, I am interested in what you're saying, I am interested and I want to take action because of what I've learned from this. So these are many more is what we're thinking about. Our social media platforms, or on all social media platforms, check out Scale for Net Zero NG. That is Scale for Net Zero NG. And the website is scale.areaiforafrica.org. Scale.areaiforafrica.org. If you're wondering, it's also what you have right here on the card. With all this said, I don't know if this is also one of the most boring or the longest, but I do hope that it also helps you to keep tabs of all that we've discussed over the months, over this period of time. And it can be your go-to episode when you want to think about what were discussed on GreenBytes Wednesday. I should say it's been a pleasure hosting all of these conversations. I want to say thank you so much to the team that has made it possible for us to record this, for the sacrifices they've made. We're really, really grateful. Ajibola, thank you. Ayo, thank you very much. Mary, thank you indeed. wonderful, for doing a wonderful job producing and coordinating all of this. Say thank you once again to the UK government and the Digital Access Program that makes it possible for us to put this out. Thank you indeed. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. And as you continue to listen to other episodes of GreenBytes Wednesday, maybe in a few months' time, there will be a new series. So keep your tabs, keep GreenBytes Wednesday on your tabs, subscribe to our different platforms. And I should say from the depth of my heart that it's really been a great honor hosting these conversations. I've learned a lot, and I do hope that you've learned something new and that you'll keep sharing. But more importantly, that you'll take actions, and together we can work towards a better, more sustainable and prosperous planet. Thanks and bye-bye. Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of GreenBytes Wednesday. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Please share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of GreenBytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your knowledge of digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and sustainable planet. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. Bye for now.